Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody here to our special evening variety program, National Park Heroes. This is a very rare opportunity that we have here. Not every day do we get to have a group like this present in the park to give such an interesting presentation. They've been here from Southern Utah University's very first semester in the Parks program. Got here right about the time of the Park Centennial in late August and spent the time since then exploring the area and the parks, deepening their understanding of why our national natural treasures are so valuable, important, and how they need to be protected. Fittingly, they've got a program prepared for us, and they'll give you the details, but kind of introducing you to people throughout time who have taken upon themselves to dedicate their lives to protecting and creating our national parks. So without any further ado, I'm going to give the mic over to Hunter, who is going to kind of give you guys the roadmap for the program ahead.
Thank you. I'm Hunter. I'm the student assistant for this program. I've been on trips with these guys to Cedar Breaks, Capitol Reef, Great Basin, and Canyonlands and Arches just last weekend. We have plans to go to Zion Pipe Springs and Grand Canyon in the future. This program has been amazing, and I'm happy that you guys are here to see what our program is doing and learning about this National Park Service. We're going to be doing presentations on our heroes that are also heroes to the National Park Service. We're going to start out with Joseph Brian Van Stavern. He's going to talk about Albert Bryce. BIERSTADT, sorry.
All right, so I'm Joey. I come in the Salt Lake Valley. I live in West Jordan, and I'm doing my presentation on Albert Bierstadt. So according to AlbertBierstadt.org, Bierstadt was born in 1830 in Solingen, Germany. He had always had a great fascination for art for as long as he could remember. Over many years, he became a great landscape artist, and in the early 1850s, he returned to Germany to study art in a university. He returned and taught art for a while, and then in 1857, he decided to dedicate his entire life to painting. He always had a wild fascination for the American West, and once he started painting those landscapes, it's as if he could never stop. His paintings were breathtaking, and they caught the attention of the American people, and this was all happening in a pivotal time for national park history. During this time, the Manifest Destiny was occurring, so a lot of people are moving from the east to the west in these natural lands. His paintings helped change the American view of land from using everything in them to having a sense of stewardship towards them. According to the National Park Service website, the Rockefellers, who the Rockefellers will be spoken about later, they actually purchased some paintings from Bierstadt, and they owned some land in a beautiful mountain range. And they were actually inspired by these paintings and by other people, and they actually gave all of this land to the National Park Service, and it became Grand Teton National Park. So this is just one personal example of what these paintings inspired people to do. Even though Bierstadt was not a politician or a park service leader, he still had an important influence on the creation of national parks. Without him and all of these other people, the national parks would have never been created. During the early 1800s, people didn't really appreciate nature the way we do now. The only thing people cared about was how they could get a benefit by the land by making a profit or building a house. His landscape paintings of Yellowstone and Sierra Nevadas captured the natural beauty and really opened up people's eyes to what's out there. His paintings inspired more westward expansion, and even Yellowstone was made the first national park shortly after in 1972. Many more parks would follow in its footsteps of Yellowstone, and there are now over 400 units in the National Park Service.
Good afternoon. My name is Alex Salambini. I grew up in a little town, Flower Mound in Texas. I am a biology major at Southern Utah University, and my national park hero was Frederick Law Olmsted. If you're not familiar with who he is, Frederick Olmsted was a landscape architect, actually from the 17th century. He was born in Connecticut, and he really changed how America saw the natural world. In an article from the National Association of Olmsted Parks, Charles E. Beveridge did a nice little brief history of his life. His mother died when he was only 4 years old, so his father raised him and his siblings, and a family diary says that they were always out visiting different areas of the East Coast of America. A quote actually says that they spent a lot of their time touring New England in search of the picturesque. So he really had his passion sparked as a child as he traveled to all these beautiful places on the East Coast. In 1837, he applied and was accepted to Yale University, and he actually fell ill and lost part of his eyesight, so he never ended up going to college. However, he decided to devote the next 20 years of his life to continue traveling. He went to Europe and traveled all across America and gained a really huge love and passion for the natural world. So it actually wasn't until later on in his career when he started doing landscape architecture, because he loved the natural world so much, he wanted to bring it into urban areas. The first project that he did is actually debatably one of the most well-known and internationally renowned projects, and it's a nice little 843-acre park in New York City that we know as Central Park. So there is his map and his landscape of when he first designed it. Following shortly after, he also had different projects such as the grounds for the U.S. Capitol. He also designed the Niagara Reservation for Niagara Falls, Prospect Park in Brooklyn, and many other amazing parks around the country, and even some in Canada. His fame quickly grew, and he became the very first United States park director and began to hold several political positions because of his contribution to conservation. And it cites that between 1856 and 1860, he published 3 books on travel and social analysis, and it suddenly became a huge catalyst in getting these early Americans interested in the outdoors and growing a national passion of nature. Though all of his work was done previous to the national parks being established in 1916, it initially ignited the love of scenery and nature and bringing those into urban areas such as New York City, and involving people and making it accessible to people who couldn't necessarily travel out into the wilderness. His philosophy on building these parks was to bring more of the natural aspect. Instead of more of an artificial landscape architecture, he wanted it to be as natural as possible. And I will close with a quote from him that says, "Though a nature hybrid may draw more attention, the former, while we have passed it by without stopping, and while it has not interrupted our conversation or called for a remark, may possibly be with other objects of the same class, have touched us more, have come home to us more, and may have had more of a soothing and refreshing influence." So I really appreciate Frederick Olmsted, what he did to draw attention to nature in America and help influence the national park system in the future.
All right. So my name is Austin Bird, and I'm originally from northern Utah, and I'm currently studying outdoor recreation at Southern Utah University. And my personal hero that I'm going to be presenting you guys today is none other than John Muir. Now, many of you may have heard of John Muir. He's very frequently talked about, especially in the Western national parks. But John Muir was born in Scotland, and as a small boy grew up in a very religious household. His father would make him memorize books of the Bible and write them down every day, constantly practicing this. Now, fast forward about 2 more decades, and he's a young man in his early 20s, and he's traveled out west and is traveling around the Sierra Nevada mountain range. Now, he decides to spend 6 weeks out there just on an extended backpacking trip. What some of you may consider doing, and I know some people in our program have considered and are eventually going to do. Now, while he was on this trip, he was so inspired by the natural beauty that he saw that he decided to journal everything that he saw, and then eventually, once his week was over, he decided to move out there. He packed up his entire life, moved away from his family, and decided that he was going to live in the Sierra Nevada mountain range. Now, while he was out there, he worked at a sawmill and a hotel, so he was able to get a very unique perspective of the parks. And here he talked to people, the ordinary people. He was kind of an early park ranger of sorts almost. He would talk to them, tour them around the area, and give them his personal theories on how the park was formed. Now, his writings that he took in his journal whenever he was touring around the Sierra Nevada originally turned out to be some of his most pivotal works that he had ever done. Those inspired him to write. It was his passion, ever since he was a young boy, from his father making him write down those Bible verses over and over again. It carried through into his everyday life. And these writings that he wrote and published about the Sierra Nevada captured everyone's imagination from coast to coast. One of the most prominent figures, who will also be talked about later, is Theodore Roosevelt. Now, John Muir's writings reached him and inspired him to the point where he decided that he would travel out here and see whether or not the Yosemite area was worthy of being made a national park. And he was so inspired by what John Muir communicated to him and his writings that he thought that there was no other option. So he went back to Washington, and Yosemite became a national park. Now, fast forward a few more decades, in 1892, John Muir has still been writing, and this time he's been writing about multiple different areas. At this year, he has just barely helped with the founding of Sequoia National Park as well in California, and he's decided with his recent success and all of his followers to form what is known now as the Sierra Club. Now, this is one of the largest conservation clubs in the world today, with over 2 million members worldwide. His purpose for forming this club was, as he phrased, to enjoy, explore, and render accessible the mountain region of the Pacific. So he used this club to publicize works, literature of all kinds, and these works helped influence him in creating more national parks and influencing politicians, from national parks such as the Petrified Forest and Glacier Bay to some much more recognizable ones such as Mount Rainier and even the Grand Canyon. John Muir's writings reached and touched the hearts of thousands across the country, from politicians to the common citizens, and he could relate to all of them because he had been in those different positions. Now, I'd like to end with one of his most famous quotes. Thousands of tired, nerve-shaken, over-civilized people are beginning to find out going to the mountains is going home. John Muir firmly believed in this, and I hope that throughout your stay in the national parks, you too will be encouraged to go out into the mountains and go home. Thank you.
All right, my name's Matthew Earl. I'm from Logan, Utah originally, and I'm going to be talking today about one of my personal heroes in the park, Theodore Roosevelt. So, a rich sense of adventure and a stubborn attitude are the words that are often used to describe Theodore Roosevelt. As a student, we learned much about every one of America's presidents, but none left their impression on me quite like this man. Theodore Roosevelt was a great president and man who took many actions to further the protection of public lands and left behind an ideology of what they should be used for. Theodore Roosevelt was the youngest man to ever become an American president after the assassination of William McKinley in 1901, and went on to serve another term in 1904. Theodore Roosevelt was first a conservationist, passionate, and a wild-hearted man who, both as president and a civilian, fought for the protection and longevity of public lands across the nation. Theodore Roosevelt was one of the first presidents to be called an environmentalist. A few of his conservation actions include pushing legislation for 5 new national parks, signing the Antiquities Antiquities Act in 1906, and creating the Forest Service. Underneath the Antiquities Act, he created 51 bird preserves, 4 game preserves, 150 national forests, and 18 national monuments. According to biography.com, he felt that his greatest actions as president were these conservation methods. Theodore Roosevelt was also a very passionate man, which was sometimes mistaken for stubbornness. One of his quotes that I particularly enjoyed about how passionate he was about these public lands was, "There can be nothing in the world more beautiful than the Yosemite, the groves of the giant sequoias and the redwoods, the canyons of the Colorado, the canyon of Yellowstone, the 3 Tetons, and our people should see to it that they are preserved for their children and their children's children forever, with their majestic beauty all unmarred." As the National Park Service.gov puts it, He saw our natural resources as limited, and he wanted to protect and cherish the greatest jewels of them. He was also known as a very wild-hearted man. He would travel the world before and after his presidency. Before his presidency, he would travel to North Dakota Badlands, or the Badlands in North Dakota, and in 1884, after the death of his mother and first wife, he would move out to North Dakota and start a ranch there. It is later said that he never felt truly at home anywhere else as he did in this area. And then after his presidency, he would continue to explore the world. He would go on a safari as soon as William Howard Taft was elected president. And during his presidency, he traveled the nation with John Muir and John Rockefeller to help explore and protect these areas. He was also the first president to ever leave the United States, traveling to the Panama Canal. And as other presidents have come and gone, and none to me have done as much as Theodore Roosevelt did for our public lands. Roosevelt left such an impact on America that 6 national parks pay tribute to him today, and his ideology can be seen across the different public land management systems. Theodore Roosevelt lived his life as a conservationist, full of passion, and as a wild-hearted man. His legacy is that America's spirit of exploration should continue to live on through generation after generation in these protected areas that Americans need the sense of adventure, and that Americans need the sense of adventure to fully fulfill their time here on Earth.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am Thomas. I am an exchange student from the Netherlands, and I'd like to talk to you on this occasion about a man whom I think is very much worthy of your admiration. This man was a great influence on the foundation and establishment of the national parks and the National Park Service. He was a businessman and a naturalist. He was one of the most, if not the most important man in the history of the National Park Service. The man I am talking about is Stephen Mather. Now, you might think I give him high praise by introducing him like this, but as you will see, he is quite worthy of it. According to his profile on the National Parks website, he was the manager or president of the Thorkildsen Mather Borax Company, which he managed so well that it made him a millionaire. So for him, nature and wildlife were 2 very important things. He was an active, or he worked actively to protect the wildlife, and nature was for him like a medicine. So one day he decided to write a letter to his friend Franklin K. Lane, who was at that time the Secretary of the Department of Interior. In this letter, he complained about the deteriorating conditions in Yosemite National Park. Upon this letter, he wrote, Franklin K. Lane answered, "Well, if you don't like the conditions of our national parks, why don't you come to Washington and do something about it?" So that's what he did. According to his profile on the National Wildlife Federation, the very first thing he did when he came to Washington was set up a bureau to protect and conserve the national parks. So in 1916, President Wilson signed the Raker-Kent-Smoot bill, and with that, the National Park Service was a fact. So Stephen Mather went on to serve as director of the National Park Service for 12 more years. In his time, the size of the national parks system almost doubled. This is all the national parks, the national monuments, everything that falls under the National Park Service. So he did a lot of important things. He set up interpretive programs, He developed policy on scenic and historic resources in the parks. He set up an outstanding personnel organization. Sadly, 1 year after his retirement in 1929, he died at the age of 63 years old. So I'd like to end my speech with some words I saw at a bronze plaque in Great Basin National Park. This bronze plaque is found in many national parks, and it reads, he laid the foundation of the National Park Service, defining and establishing the policies under which its areas shall be developed and conserved, unimpaired for future generations. There will never come an end to the good that he has done.
Hi folks, that's pretty hard to top, and I won't try to. My name is Anastasia, and I come from colorful Colorado. So if any of you love the national parks, you should definitely come visit there. Now, when Zion National Park was first opened its gates in 1920, the world anxiously awaited the stories that would come from the new national park. 5 co-eds from the University of Utah sat on the gate as it opened. One of these inspiring students was named Isadora Montague. I first heard of this daring woman at a lecture at Semester in the Parks, known as Trailblazers and Travelogues. And ever since that time, I've been fascinated with her. State records show that she was born in Payson, Utah, and eventually made her way to the University of Utah as a promising student. During the 1920s, the feminist movement was just kicking off and gaining momentum, and historian John Clark describes how newspapers of the day were filled with reports on what the fashionable, well-dressed outdoorswoman of the day was wearing. So that shows how women started to take hold of outdoor adventure by being both fashionable and functional. I personally think that Isadora was quite the daredevil. One of the most iconic pictures of her is her hanging off a cliff in Zion National Park, calmly sketching. It's one of my favorite pictures. And her fiance actually saw this picture in a newspaper and wrote to her saying, "Why are you wearing my Yale sweater?" So she's one of my favorite people because of that. And images of her and the other co-eds that she was with actually helped to prove that the National Park Service was accessible to all people. And stories of their adventures in Zion can be found in a book called Opening Zion, a scrapbook of the national parks. And even after her engagement and her eventual marriage, Isadora found her way back to Zion, her favorite national park. In fact, one of her co-eds said that Dora makes it back to the park more than most of us others. Isadora Montague is a reminder that we may not be the first person to discover a national park or a beauty in nature, but we can always celebrate it. We must always share our love of the parks preserved for us, the common man and woman, just like Isadora Montague.
Well, hello everyone. How are you all doing tonight? Good, fantastic. My name is Mackenzie Manis, and I am an entrepreneur from Southern Utah University. And tonight I would like to share with you my admiration for a man who truly helped to contribute to the National Park Service. He was a businessman, a philanthropist, a family man, and someone who helped establish many of the parks that are very fond to us now. I'd like to talk to you about John D. Rockefeller Jr. On January 29, 1874, John D. Rockefeller Jr. was born into a family of wealth. His father, John D. Rockefeller Sr., had begun an oil monopoly in the 1860s, which had established him as the richest man on earth. Over the course of his lifetime, John Rockefeller Jr. saw his father transition from a businessman to a philanthropist and donate millions of his own earnings to causes he became passionate for during his life. This would encourage him to do later so in his own life. John D. Rockefeller Jr.'s first encounter with the national parks began in 1926 when the current Superintendent Yellowstone, Horace Albright, extended an invitation for him to visit the valley himself. During that time, Rockefeller created a strong love and desire to give back to the parks. And his first park that he got to contribute to was actually the Grand Tetons. Have any of you guys been there? Yeah, okay, that's great. So his first generous donation began there. The proposal for that park was decades ago, but because so many people owned ranches in that area, there was no way that they could establish the park at that time. So Rockefeller actually spent $1.5 million purchasing all kinds of ranches secretly in that valley, and he put them in a private trust, but he decided to keep some of the property for his family. So all the land got donated, and that became Grand Teton National Park, and that was a story that I found on the National Park website. And then according to the Great Smoky page, or Great Smoky Mountains page, in 1928, Rockefeller donated $5 million to the protection of the Great Smoky Mountains in remembrance of his mother, Laura Spellman, who he believed would have truly loved the land. In addition, Acadia, Shenandoah, and several more parks have become additions to the National Park Service because of the contributions of the Rockefeller family. As an entrepreneur myself, I have felt inspired by John D. Rockefeller Jr. because he set the precedence of public lands above business itself, which is something that many people would consider contradicting. He was an avid Baptist, philanthropist, and family man. Rockefeller set a precedent and legacy that his son Lawrence Rockefeller would later continue. Without the contributions of the Rockefeller family, it is supposed by many these wonders would have fallen to commercialization before they could have been protected. The National Park Service is grateful for his generosity, and I am too. I would like to leave you with a quote that was given when his son Lawrence Rockefeller in 2001 gave the remaining family ranch to the National Park Service. And it reads, "I have always shared my father's vision, not only to give generously, but also that people should live in harmony with nature. For 75 years, the majestic property has been preserved for our family, and I am gratified that henceforth it will be preserved for the American people." I want to thank you all for coming out here tonight, and I'm glad I could share this message with you. I hope that you will all in the future, when you visit these parks, think of the Rockefeller family and have the admiration that I have towards them myself.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming out tonight. I'm so excited to be here with you today. My name is Abby Slick and I'm a biology student from Brigham Young University. I snuck into SEU for this semester so I could be part of this wonderful program, and I'm so grateful they let me in. Today, I want to talk to you about one of my personal heroes, especially as a biology student, and that person is Adolph MURIE. Adolph MURIE once said, "Life is richest where the greatest diversity exists in the natural order." Without him and his life's work, we might not know how true this statement is today. He was a biologist, a naturalist, a conservationist, and a revolutionary force in the national park system. He helped shape the wildlife management policies that we have today that we see in many parks. According to the National Park Service, he earned a degree in biology from Concordia College and a PhD from University of Michigan in 1929. During this time, the park system often believed that predators needed to be controlled within the park. For example, at McKinley Park, the Dall sheep population had a significant decline, and many people believed that it was because of wolf predation that was causing this decline. Now, Adolph MURIE, he believed that when you studied the parks, you needed to look at the ecosystem as a whole and not just at the single organisms. So he came to this park to study the wolf to sheep relationship. After spending a 2-year study in McKinley Park, he realized that the decline was due to severe late winter weather and not wolf predation, and that predators played an important role in the ecosystem. Later, he wrote a book called The Wolves of Mount McKinley. This breakthrough in the study of ecology would help Mount McKinley and other areas ran by the National Park Service to create the widely known philosophy of today to preserve intact ecosystems. In episode 6 of the film series by Ken Burns, The National Parks, America's Best Idea, that some of you may be familiar with, he talks about Adolph MURIE and several of the huge contributions and things that he did to help the National Park Service. One of these stories includes in the 50s and 60s about the construction of a highway and a gas station and a hotel that the National Park Service was planning on building. Adolph fought for this for many long years, and told them how important it was to preserve the park and not to have these huge hotels and gas stations in it. Eventually, he won a partial victory as they stopped the construction 13 miles into the road and terminated the construction plans for the hotel and gas station. He was an effective wilderness advocate through his writings and films as well. He wrote 4 different books, created several films, and wrote for many different magazines. He received the Service Award from the National Park Service and the prestigious John Burroughs Medal for all of his work. To get a better understanding of Adolph MURIE, I want to share a quote with you from his beloved wife, Louise. She said, "Ade, as he was known to his friends, spent many hours with telescope and binoculars watching the interactions of the various species of wildlife. It was his habit, after the evening meal, to write in his journal details of each day in considerable detail. But at the same time, he was interacting with the people who visited the park, for he met and talked with many of the visitors from all parts of the world and discussed with them the values inherent in the parks. He was always a champion of the national park idea and expressed the thought that lands therein should be preserved in their national condition." Adolph MURIE is more than just a biologist. He was a hero and a revolutionary force in the National Park Service. And I hope that just as I am grateful for him, you might be able to be better understanding of who he was and how he shaped the Park Service as well. Thank you.
Afternoon, guys. My name is Davis Rackham. I'm from Orem, Utah. Quick question, could I get a raise of hands? Who has heard of Wallace Stegner? All right, it seems like less than half. I was with the other half. However, after some research, he's definitely a hero of one park in particular. Anyone know what it is? All right, we'll see. Anyone recognize it? All right, we'll come to there. Wallace Stegner was born in 1909. His father was one of those people who would go out and chase his dreams, and that took Stegner around much of the West during his early childhood. It was because of this that he got a lot of his beliefs and ethics about how the wilderness should be kept wild. He eventually became a writer, and through his writings, he promoted wilderness, he promoted the parks, and he fought for conservation and preservation as opposed to overuse and destruction of these natural wonders. Have any of you been to Dinosaur National Monument? There we go. This right here is the Echo Park curve of the Dinosaur National Monument. In the 1950s, there was a proposal going around to dam this to create a reservoir for water for surrounding communities. One of Stegner's most famous letters was to David Pisonen, and it was fighting this, and he actually was successful, and the dam was never built, as a few of you are probably aware of. And so he saved Dinosaur National Monument from becoming another Hetch Hetchy. A good quote from this letter that I'll close with is, "Something will have gone out of us as a people if we ever let the remaining wilderness be destroyed. If we permit the last virgin forests to be turned into comic books and plastic cigarette cases, if we drive the few remaining members of the wild species into zoos or to extinction, if we pollute the last clean air and dirty the last clean streams and push our paved roads through the last of the silence, so that never again will Americans be free in their own country from the noise, the exhausts, and the stink of human and automotive waste, something will have gone out of us." And hopefully you've gained a little more knowledge and some appreciation for Wallace Stegner, and that's all.
Hello, I'm Hunter. I already talked to you guys a little bit, but I'm from Salt Lake area, and I'm here to talk to you about one of my heroes, my biggest heroes in or out of the Park Service, and that is Edward Abbey. So, no matter what you think of him, he is one of the first people who comes to mind when you think about the American Southwest. He first fell in love with the West when he was 17. He wanted to go on an adventure before he was drafted into the military, and so he hitchhiked, rode buses, and rode trains all through the West to find these beautiful areas. He then joined the military. He was in Italy and was promoted twice and then demoted twice and eventually honorably discharged for not respecting authority. He then used a GI Bill to go to the University of New Mexico, where he earned a master's in philosophy and English. After this, he worked for the National Park Service, notably in Arches, where he had the inspiration for his book, Desert Solitaire. And then after this, worked at the University of Arizona as a professor teaching creative writing. He's remembered mostly for his novels, Desert Solitaire and Monkey Wrench Gang, where he preached about anarchism, environmentalism, and his plight against industrial tourism. Many believe that he was an angry, selfish person, but I believe he was a humorous, passionate man who fought for a cause in a strong and unique way. And that's why I wanted to show this picture of him to you guys. He was a great, happy man. He fought to preserve land, which in my opinion was a noble cause. And he started an attitude of preservation that affected all age groups and still affects everybody today. It's a testament of the power of his movement that we still talk about him as much as we do today, and that we still study his literature. He was an advocate for the parks, but maybe not the National Park Service. He was an advocate for tourists, but maybe not the automobiles that drove them. And most importantly, at least to me, he was an advocate for people like me who want to see a desert that's untrammeled and wild, like it used to be. I want to end with a quote from my personal copy of Desert Solitaire, which is my favorite. He says, "A man on foot, on horseback, or on a bicycle will see more, feel more, enjoy more in 1 mile than a motorized horse can in 100 miles. Better to idle through one park in 2 weeks than try to race through a dozen in the same amount of time." Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Zoe, I'm from France. I study Hotel, Resort and Hospitality Management at SUU. Today I'm going to be talking to you about Terry Tempest William. So, Terry Tempest William is an American activist, writer and conservationist born in 1955 in California. Her work is famous for the issues that it addresses, such as ecology, women's health and equality, and of course wilderness and nature. She's a national park hero for activism and her writing career. Williams was raised in the LDS religion, and she has took up on a lot of challenges surrounding the Mormon culture. Her biggest fight was, and still is, to grant equal rights in the church to women. She is a pioneer in the Mormon feminist movement, and she is an advocate that women should be able to carry priesthood, as she states it in her open letter to the LDS church leader that can be found on the Patriarch's website. The time has come to shift the religious inequality toward women and allow sisters to lead alongside their brothers in prayers and power and purpose. She also wrote and made her voice heard about the BP oil spill that happened on the 20th of April 2010 in the Gulf of Mexico. According to Ocean Portal, this oil spill was the worst one in American history. And so after hearing about such a tragedy, she went by herself to the Gulf of Mexico to see the disaster, but mostly to talk to the people. and hear what they had to say about it. And after that, she stated in an interview to Orion magazine, "When the press and politicians leave, when the camera are turned off and the money is paid out by BP, the people remain sick and sick at heart." But her activism can also be seen in many of the books she wrote. In fact, she wrote like a lot of books about wilderness and the natural world. Several of her books have been acclaimed by awards, such as The Secret Language of Snow, which is a children's book, but it receives the National Science Foundation Book Award. Her talented writing also got her to win the Utah Book Award, the Mormon Art and Letter Association Award, the Southwest Book Award, and many others. A lot of her work is really tied to national park, and in her book Finding Beauty in a Broken World, she talks about how, among all the places that she has visited, Bryce Canyon deeply affected her and helped her after the loss of an important member of her family. And she also explained how she studied and observed prairie dogs just a few miles away from here. So her work always reflects on the relationship between mankind and the natural world, and her books are a chance to give us an educated insight about this relationship thanks to her master's degree in environmental education. So Terry Tempest Williams is a National Park hero for her engagement toward nature and her many fights against inequalities and injustices. Her activism will always be applauded by the National Park Services, and her pure mind is a gift to us and everyone who wish to protect the natural world.
So I would just like to end and thank everyone on behalf of Southern Utah University, the Semester in the Park students and staff, and Bryce Canyon National Park for attending this today. We hope that our humble tribute to some of our favorite national park heroes has ignited a passion to help and has ignited a passion in you and will help you continue to build the legacy of the national parks and its affiliates. All of the individuals we spoke about today have sacrificed greatly for the amazing privilege that us as United States citizens and also visitors from around the globe have, and that is these amazing, beautiful, wonderful national parks. Of course, there are many who deserve more recognition than we were able to touch on today, and the list of heroes continues to add on as rangers, supporters, advocates, and visitors come through these parks every day. If you have any questions on our special Semester in the Parks program, or if you want to know information on some of the people that we talked about today, feel free to come up, introduce yourself, talk to us a little bit, ask questions. If not, we want to thank you again for coming today, and we hope you enjoy, and we wish you safe travels in all of your future park adventures.